Just light and happy.
Well, I mean, like that's the cool thing about this is it's my own thing. So we could talk about whatever we want. Interesting conversations is where it is at. So
that's right. Good conversations, absolutely.
That's what I'm saying. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
We are live on the YouTube. I'm going to grab the link real quick and send it your way. That's kind of one of the things that I like so much about this whole thing is that it's casual. I don't want these to ever become like overproduced or anything that's uncomfortable or requires, you know, a bunch of bullshit for it to be like
I think
be a part of.
I think that candidness is appreciated. I think a lot of people like it. It's essentially in some ways like a broadcast selfie. It's very raw, it's very real, you know?
Yeah.
Because there's something to be said for production.
But in a way it's
there we go. I just want to get it pulled up over here so I can have it as well. But woohoo!
Yeah. No, same. I'm always in here kind of monitoring comments. So I definitely kind of want everything to be, because I feel like there's places your conversations can go when you're not overly concerned about, you know, production or looking like things are slick or whatever, that they probably aren't going to go if you're super consumed with just looking professional. So, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, that's not the life I want to live.
Right?
Hey, can you shut that door for me, please?
We have a cameo.
It's that quarantine life.
That quarantine.
So we have Olga Tinyanin with us already. Hey, Olga, welcome.
Hi, Olga. How are you?
So, of course, before we get into anything too deep, how is stuff going for you over Texas way? I know you're kind of easing back into work.
Yeah. It's a little, I mean, not trying to sound ignorant, but you know, here in Texas, they have a slightly different outlook overall. I mean, there's a lot of varying opinions and evidence, but they have a slightly different outlook on lockdown. So things are opening up here carefully, but still somewhat liberally, I guess, you know. So work inquiries are popping up again, and I'm taking them as carefully as I can and reasonably as I can. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's been like everyone else. I've been 3 months of basically locked down, but it's picking up, and literally it's like a flip of a switch. Something like a week and a half ago, it started, and now I'm fielding inquiries and I'm planning things for July, August, and whatnot, which I am grateful for, absolutely grateful for, but doing it carefully.
Yeah, for sure. And what are some of the things? So, and that's something I think we're really having the conversation about now is how do we move forward now in a way that's both like productive and profitable for us, but also safe for us and our teams, our models, et cetera. So what are some of the things you're doing to kind of move forward safely?
Well, honestly, when thinking about it, you know, because obviously I've had a lot of time to think with all this lockdown. Most of what I do is already kind of, for lack of a better term, safe. I mean, I don't usually get large crowds of people together in tight spaces. I've been shooting outdoors so much now for so long. So it hasn't changed that much, but when I'm going into a studio to do a project, which I'm doing tomorrow, for example, you know, just minimal team, not a huge project, keep the space between us, you know, makeup artist going to have a mask, you know, we're trying to be as reasonable as we can, but still go forward. So mercifully, what I always did, apart from airplane rides, was never really involving dense groups, if you don't count conferences and airplane rides, like I said. So it's not that different, to be perfectly honest. For me, anyway.
That's good. Yeah, because at least that means that it's not forcing you to kind of learn to work in an entirely new way. So that's nice.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I've said it before on to many people and to my own broadcast that I've done. I'm grateful. There's a lot of people who have lost everything in the arts, you know, full-time artists. They've lost their businesses. They're doing odd jobs to get by. I applaud them for trying. I have not lost all, so I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, that's awesome. What are there, or was there anything that you did kind of in the interim to hang on, like, you know, to the business? Were there things that you were doing?
There was actually, always being an educator. I was offering, a huge discount, 50% off on my one-on-one mentoring, because everybody's doing this online chat thing like we're doing now, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been doing online mentoring that way for years. So I pushed it a little bit harder. I gave 50% off. I said, talk to me. Some people that they hit me up, they needed to take 2 payments for the 50% off. It helped me and it helped them. And I've been more or less surviving off private mentoring for the last 3 months. And I also was going to produce a new series of video tutorials for retouching during this lockdown. And before that got off outline mode, then Pro ADU got involved.
Right.
And so that I flipped that direction and kept it quiet for a while, but now Pro ADU is announced. So that also is what I've been doing.
Yeah. And which, like, thank goodness for that. It's always nice to have those separate income streams that you can rely on when, other stuff goes dark. So, and hopefully that's something other photographers take to heart too. I feel like at this point, which, and you can tell me what you think, but it seems like the photographers who are making a good living on purely photography alone are starting to dwindle. It seems like most of us have had to branch out somehow, whether that's, teaching or other services. It seems mostly within the photography genre, but most of us, it seems like, have had to kind of branch out in order to keep paying the bills.
I agree. And I think that I'll extend that further by saying that as a full-time artist, let me preface this. A lot of financial advisors and otherwise rich people who like to give financial advice always say multiple streams. And that's true. But we don't all have millionaire type of money, right? But if you do have multiple ways of making money, it definitely does help. But as a creative trying to work full time, you have to be creative business wise, because like for me, when the first 7-8 years that I was a photographer, there's no way I was making a living off photography. I was mostly switching to education because I decided to start doing that in 2012 and I realized I was pretty good at it. So that kept me going. So I was like, okay, so education's working. I got to diversify further. And I kept trying to diversify further because if workshops flopped for a quarter or for a season or something like that, I was dead. I always had to find new ways. And that's why I ended up going in different directions. And sure enough, during the lockdown, it saved my butt, including my plugins, my Photoshop plugins. We did some sales on that and that helped things get by,
Right. I really wish we could kind of remove the stigma around this idea that it seems like most photographers want to give off the impression that that's the only way they make money, and then not talk about the fact that, no, these other things I do aren't supplementary. They actually are important to how I make my living. And there seems to be a weird unspoken stigma around that, which I don't really understand, because it doesn't make you any less skilled or talented at what you do. It just means that the markets are changing, right?
It does. And I tend to draw a lot of parallels to music, and a lot of pro musicians that I know, even before the lockdown, they're professional drummers, something like that. They're in 5 or 6 cover bands playing 90s hits to a bar every Friday and Saturday night to make money. And then they're in one band. That one band is their original band that they're trying to, quote, make it. And they write their material. They're happy to get any gig they can, but they pay the bills with the cover gigs. Even if they're playing Wonderwall for the 150th time in a month, they have to pay the bills, and you don't shame them for that, No. And we as artists have to find ways to pay the bills too. That's how I see
totally it. Totally fair. Agreed. I totally agree with you. And I'll just take a quick second to welcome Kelly Robitaille is joining us. Gary Monroe is here. Bobby Thompson. So welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
Gary says that he doesn't know of a single photographer that only does photography, and that most of the ones he knows are adding in something supplementary. So and sense. Guys, please, if you have questions for Nino, drop those in the comments and we'll see what we can get to as we go along. So, and Kelly is picking up her kids, but she says she'll be back. So we'll see you in, Kelly. Yeah. And I feel bad because we kind of were mid conversation when we went live. I didn't get the chance to be like, hey guys, welcome to the social hour. This is Nino Batista. He's an amazing internationally published glamour photographer and educator and just all around super awesome guy.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for having me. You are a super awesome chick, and I'm glad you had me here. I'm honored.
Yeah, thanks, man. I'm glad. I always enjoy our conversations. So I'm glad we get to do this. I'm looking forward to where everything goes. And that's my favorite part, is if we're having a free flowing conversation, then we get the freedom to kind of follow these tangents that maybe never would have happened if I like had a list of interview questions and we were just going one at a time.
I think we should just dive right into politics and religion and just go out in a blaze of glory. Let's go.
Yep. Let's do it. It'll definitely be the most interesting conversation that's been on here, I bet. Let's see, Bobby says he was working in the indie film and photography for about 50-50 for the first 12 years, and then the industries merged. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, how much overlap we're seeing these days.
It's true. Yeah. And you have to a lot of times diversifying yourself isn't that much of a technical stretch. You just got to practice whatever it is you're diversifying into. Of course, photography and video, in a lot of ways, they're completely different animals. That's one example. You see a lot of photographers like, I'm going to get into video. Okay, cool. Don't do that lightly. Mm-hmm. It's not that simple, but nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, it's easy to conflate the two, because you can use kind of the same equipment, but the approach is not the same animal at all.
Yeah, I am a hack on video, and I know it. I point a camera and I capture footage and then I slap it together. I am fully aware with the video guys that I know how technical and complex it can be. And I just have a vague idea, and I have a huge respect for it. So when I do video for fun, I don't go in there thinking I'm a cinematographer. Oh, hell, right. I'm just playing, and I know that.
Yeah. It's good to recognize it. And also I think for us to kind of acknowledge that as we're trying to broaden our skill sets, that it's going to take a while before those supplementary or additional skills get to the point where we can actually use them in a business setting in like an actually profitable way.
Right. Like you're still doing animation work, right? I lost you. Yeah. And if you go into a new, I don't want to say genre, but a new discipline, as it were, in a new medium, it's cool.
Slowly building into that.
Yeah. And you've got it. By the way, we have a huge lag. It might catch up. I don't know, but it's like a 5-6 second lag right now. But yeah, no, it's good to be diverse, not just in the art and the medium that you're using, but the way you kind of leverage it in your business. I mean, I think diversity is good, but not to a fault. Like I shoot glamour and newborns. Whoa, what? You shoot glamour and newborns? Might be pushing it. That might be pushing it.
Yeah. No, I think at least where I've landed right now is somewhere that merges the different things that I do. So the audience is generally the same for both sides of the equation, because I write, I'm an author, and then the photography and digital art and all of those things kind of sit firmly within that surrealistic fantasy genre. And so the audiences are kind of the same. So I've been pushing those things together. And then the supplementary skills that I've been learning over this quarantine are all within that wheelhouse that makes sense in order to use. But if I was all of a sudden to be like, yeah, now I'm shooting music videos, people would be like, really?
I mean, yeah. And if you did, you'd probably, unfortunately, wouldn't be that great initially, and people would notice that. It's like, for example, I go back to music. You can't see it, but right off frame right here, there's a drum set. I am very much a newbie drum set. I can keep 4 on the floor beat. I am not a drummer. If I go and decide I'm a drummer and audition for a band, I'm going to embarrass myself. You got to be realistic when you diversify. You got to be realistic when you diversify and still put in the time. I think that's harder for adults to think, I've got to put couple of thousands of hours into this because I did that so long ago, perhaps. Now I got to do it again on something new. We get arrogant, like, no, I got this. You may not.
Yeah. I mean, if you can be honest with yourself, and if you still want to give it a go, go do your thing, but at least know where you're at and be honest enough to be like, okay, this might crash and burn. I was actually thinking about that this morning as well, because it struck me how often when I'm creating something, my entire goal is to make it the best thing that it can be. And often you don't want to release anything until you're like, does it fit my vision? And did I do all of the stuff? And I realized that there's really no way to know if the thing you made was the best possible version of what it could have been. Like, we look at classical artworks and we're like, oh, these people reached the pinnacle of what creation means. No, we don't know. Like, how do you know that that was the best way to approach that thing? Maybe it would have been better if the light had been different. Maybe it would have been better if they chose what, like, you don't know. So you just have to make the thing and be like, here, world.
We definitely romanticize the past. I mean, who's to say that Michelangelo didn't go, you know what? Fuck it. This is done. I can't look at this anymore. And then now it's a masterpiece.
Right. Right.
It's totally possible. And we all do that at some point. God, I know I do. I'm just like, I'm out. You know what? Export, deliver. I'm done. And then I go, you know what? That wasn't that bad. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And that, I mean, that whole philosophy of finished is better than perfect. Right.
Yeah. Yep. Which is right in line with 90% of success is showing up. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Just being willing to do the thing and then release the thing into the world and be like, you know, there it goes. And there's nothing saying that we can't come back to that stuff eventually and redo a thing if we're like, I thought of a better way to do that.
Yeah. And how many times, I don't know about you, because social media, we get some, for whatever it's worth, we get a regular stream of some external validation based on what people critique or comment on your posts, right? Okay. So that's like constantly showing your artwork, right? All right. So you finish an edit and you go, maybe you're indifferent, maybe it's late, maybe you're tired, and you go and you export it. It's not horrible. I'm going to export it. And then the next 24 hours, people are freaking out. People are like, oh my God, amazing, dude, this is your best work yet. Or I can't believe this. Oh, mind blown. And you're like, you know, and every now and then that happens, and you're like, do I overthink myself? Yes, I do.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Gary says it seems like more and more photographers are now Zoom interviewers. Touche, Gary. To just be fair to myself, I'm also a writer for several outlets, and so this gives me a way to kind of get a chat with cool people and then write up those interviews. So I'm basically filling up my interview log so I can write articles. You know, no shame in my game. I get both. I get to talk with really cool people and I get fodder for upcoming articles. But the cool thing is that means that these awesome people I chat with get more visibility on other platforms. So it's kind of a win-win.
That's right. And hanging out with Nicole is always a plus. I don't even care if 2 people are watching. That's fine by me.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're fun. I'm glad. And I'm glad that photographers are doing them. I think having more candid conversations like this is a help to the industry, because so much of what we do is couched in this idea of like, oh, their process and the fancy things, and that's this untouchable level of people, right? Like we don't even know what they do, but they're amazing.
Right.
Whatever. This saw my kid walk out of the bathroom.
Right. Mine's down there. You know, it humanizes everybody. And I think that goes back to an intern that I had who's actually working with Pratik lately. His name is Logan. And this was 7-8 years ago. And we were in Dallas. And this is to me a profound story, because I hate photos of myself. I don't like taking portraits, blah, blah, blah. Well, he told me one day while we were setting some lighting up for a workshop, he goes, you need a headshot. And I said, I don't. I hate that. I hadn't had, and he told me, people need to see you. It's part of your marketing. I said, who the hell wants to see me? Anyway, he threw me in front of the light, took a couple of snaps. I slapped it together and I said, fine, I'll put a headshot up. And in no uncertain terms, it changed my marketing. And not because people were amazed of what I looked like. It was that they could see me, especially in my genre. Right. It humanized me. And then I kept going with that. And conferences wanted the yearly headshots, and that's fine. I hate doing it, but I did it. And I would argue that in humanizing myself and making myself accessible on that abstract way, it did help. I don't have evidence of it, but I feel like as much as I hated photos of myself, making myself approachable, especially as an educator, if I want to be this mysterious, enigmatic artist who no one knows who he is, that's different. But I need to be an educator, and people need to know that I'm just a dork and you can talk to me, right? So anyway.
Yeah, agree. Which is a good pitch for you non-photographers out there, but also for you photographers to get your headshot taken.
That's right.
Do that thing. No, I agree. I have a couple that I end up having to force myself to do, because I'm behind the camera for a reason. I don't want to be in front. If I'm in front of the camera, it's usually because somebody's getting a behind the scene and I'm like, you know, I can't have a camera in my face and be like, professional, you know, I have to something goofy. It doesn't work for me. So
you're saying you're not going to let me shoot you then? That's what you're saying.
I mean, like, you know, I can't promise you'll get anything like good out of it, but probably going to be. So I was an admin for a photography group for a little while, and there wasn't a whole lot of people to shoot, and a couple of the other members were like, can you just, do this for us? I'm like, sure. So I will tell you what the banner of that Facebook group is. It was me sitting under a tree going like this, like for a really long time. And they call it, what did they call it? The Nicolosaurus or something like that. Yeah.
That is so Nicole.
That's, so that's probably what you go home with, is me making some kind of crazy face.
I'm okay with it.
Ooh, let me just whack stuff. In that vein, let's kind of roll back a little bit. How did you move? Because I know you were a musician, right? And you are a musician, but how did you transition from the music into photography?
Sure. So I was from high school, which was early 90s for me. I'm old. From high school onward, I was a graphic designer. Working on Mac systems, and I worked on Photoshop in the very earliest versions in the early 90s, and I kept going from there and built a career. I had a business I was running with my folks and my brother independently. I worked occasionally for some independent newspapers. I was a graphics guy, from the beginning.
Sure.
And so even in the late 80s on Apple computers, before we had too many Macs, we had Apple II GS and things. And I was always making graphics. However, my entire lifetime, my dad is a photographer, and he still is.
Oh, okay.
So I had that always there, but that was, what dad did, right? So I did my thing, and then I did the music thing as well, late 90s, early 2000s. And then unfortunately, how I got into photography story isn't dripping with, passion and sacrifice. It's more necessity, because in 2008, with the financial difficulties, I was at that point doing web design for over a decade. And so I was doing that. Music was basically gone because I now had children who are now teenagers, but I had children at the time. They were new. I couldn't come home at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning smelling like a bar. So music was done. And in 2008, things got tough, and my graphic design firm, was on the way out, let's be honest. And so I thought, what do? I got to diversify. And having grown up around it and being a Photoshop guy, photography made sense. So I started dabbling. And at the time, my now ex-wife, I photographed her, and she let me photograph her, and I practiced, and we had a little home studio we set up. And like anybody else, I stunk at the beginning. I asked Dad a bunch of tips and advice, and then I just kept practicing. So it was born of necessity, unfortunately, and it didn't work at first. 2009 was a financially devastating year, and 2010 was not much better. 2011 was the recovery year, and by the end of 2011, I was doing this, as it were. And by 2012, I thought I was going to be an automotive photographer, because that's all I was doing. And then things changed from there. And the reason why I got in the workshop direction was because the automotive clients, all within a couple of months, which were giving me steady work, all decided they were going to go in-house, or they were going to be cheap and not want to pay rate anymore. And so I went, now what? And on social media, a couple of people said, do you give workshops on shooting models? And I said, no, who am I? And then when I lost the automotive clients, I said, I give workshops suddenly. So I did everything, in earnest. I did everything with sincerity, but I did it out of necessity, and I think it was the beginning of 2013 when I said, well, here I am now, something on the order of, well, I was at 37, 38, something like that. And I said, I finally found something that I think I'm actually good at. I just kind of trudged through the other stuff. And I said, this is it. This I'm sticking to. There's no more changes. I'm going to make this happen, do or die. So.
It's so interesting how often that is the story, that we set off in a direction and we stumble through and we move through these different genres or whatever until we end up at last on the thing that works. And for some of us, maybe we were headed in that direction the whole time, but for others, we really just kind of found it through trial and error.
Yeah. And to one of my biggest realizations in the transition was being a Photoshop guy. When I started photography, I was a Photoshop guy for almost 20 years. So I was like, retouching? Are you kidding me? I got this. And Nicole, I didn't got this. Graphic
I didn't got it.
I didn't got it because graphic design and photo retouching are completely different animals. I know that now, but it was a real slap in the face because I have no idea what I'm doing. My retouching was terrible because I didn't know what I was doing. I even had some arrogance because I was a Photoshop guy. No, completely different. And I had to get some education on that after a year of struggle. And that's where I called on Pratik Naik a decade ago. We became friends, but he completely changed my career in a weekend, to be perfectly honest. And I tell him that to his face, so no shame there. But that was a real education for me because you realize that even the same tools don't apply to different disciplines. You have to learn the techniques, right? So that was the real awakening for me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Every time I try to design anything for myself, I'm like, oh God, graphic design is an entirely different animal. What are these color weights and fonts and kerning and why?
Kerning and lettering and all that.
Canva and Design Market and places like that. Yeah, where I can be like, hey, you professionals, let me pay you for stuff that you did already. I'll just take that for myself. Thank you very much.
By the way, I'm going to share.
Like, no wonder all your stuff always looks so good.
I'm going to share the live link right now, real quick. But to be honest,
do the thing.
To be honest with you, I always thought my graphics work was adequate, but I always looked up to like the graphic design work in firms and artists that I knew and liked. I always thought, wow. Whereas in photography, I feel like my work is like ready for prime time after a lot of work, a lot of practice. But in graphic design, I always felt like I was a bit of a hack, if I'm perfectly honest, So I'm not trying to be a jerk, but
no, that is really interesting because it just goes to show something that I've been talking about for a while in articles and both in person, but this idea that in order to be a legitimate photographer, you have to be a business person. And there are lots of photography studios out there and photographers who are very successful and their photography is fine. It's not extraordinary or, like world class, but they're great business people and they're delivering a product that their clients are happy with. It may not be the best potential work that ever could exist, but it's fine. And some people are photographers purely to run a business, and that's fine as well. And some people are amazing and business is just not where they need to be. So I'd written an article about that aimed at moms because I'm a mom and they were not happy about that at all. Which, to be fair, I understand since moms, kind of feel picked on in the photography world a little bit.
Or a lot.
Which strangely enough has never been part of my experience. I sometimes feel a little bit bummed out that because of my commitment to my family, that means that my progress in this industry is a little bit slower. I have to take my time with things because I have other, needs that I have to fill, which you as a dad, I'm sure understand, especially when many of our peers are childless or they're able to travel and other things without kind of that additional responsibility
or half
but
my
I've
age.
never had anybody that as well. I feel that when they're like, I graduated in 2010 and I'm like, what? That's not even a year.
You have all the energy and no kids. I
know, but I've never felt that personally. Like I've never ever felt that from other photographers, you know what I mean? So I wonder how much of that is us moms just feeling our own issues and how much of it is actually a stigma against mom-tographers.
So I have some thoughts on that because I've told people this before. I think the stigma against the mom-tographer really, and this is, if you want to go controversial, let's just go for it, right? It's actually a further extension of just the systemic sexism that we have, especially in photography. So it's not that they're moms, that's females. And there's a lot of men, especially, who'll be like, mom-tographers, you should be raising babies, not doing this technical stuff that we're doing. And that's, I think, where it comes from. Now, I will also expand on that and say that a lot of people do the mom-tographer thing. They buy a camera and then they start shooting. They call themselves a photographer and their work is snapshot grade. And they try to make a career out of it. And some do. And some of them are just college dudes. And some of them are moms and some of them are grandmas and some of them are old men and some of them are me. And it's fine as far as I'm concerned. I think that we see the problem everywhere. So any type of stigma on momtographer, unfortunately, it's not because of mom. It's not because they're the ones causing the most that are noticed the most in that idea of buying a camera and taking snapshots. I just think it's, unfortunately, you know, mom should be quiet and raising babies and not doing this. And there's some, not certainly everybody thinks that, but there's enough of that, I think, and that's where it comes from. Because when you say momtographer, there's such a dark, just, I don't know, it's a very insulting connotation. And I'm like, what's wrong with being a photographer and a mom? Hold up, what's the problem here?
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. Are there people entering the field every single day because they bought an entry level DSLR, or often a nice DSLR, and they don't know what they're doing? Yeah, but it's not just moms. Come on, it's everybody.
No, yeah, for real. And also, I think some of that. Hi, Pratik. Pratik is here as well with us.
I was just talking about him.
I know all the best things, Pratik. We'll never tell.
He can rewind, Nicole.
Oh, damn it. Not for a little while. We've got at least like 40 minutes of safety before he can do that.
That's right. That's right.
But yeah, and I think maybe some of that also comes from the fact that as moms, often when we first get into the business, it's usually at the encouragement of our family and our friends, because they like what we're doing. And then we get this great feeling of like being good at something and getting approbation and then making money for it as well. But most of the time, and I know that I absolutely did, I did all the wrong things. I jumped into things that I should not have done, that we tell photographers not to do. Like, please do not shoot a wedding when you're the only photographer with no experience. Like, don't do that. I totally did it. You know, all of the things.
All of it. All the things.
Right. And we do it because they're, at least for my generation of photographer, we got in and there was not a whole lot of education out there around the business side of how you progress, like what things you should do business wise before you get in. And so a bunch of us just kind of piled in and we're like, yeah, $50 shoots. And then the working professionals are like, no, what are you doing? You are flooding the market with cheap prices. But there was, you know, to be fair, you kind of invited that on yourselves a little bit, because there was nobody to tell us what was right or where to go. And so in some ways, I think that stigma came around a little bit because we jumped in not knowing what we were doing. And of course, we didn't know what to charge. So we didn't charge much, you know, and so it was the same, I think, attack on shoot and burners and, you know, all of the people who very first started, because nobody was charging much, but we didn't know any better. There wasn't Creative Live reaching masses telling us all how to do things, you know.
And you know, in any discipline, any art discipline, there's the barrier of entry is always the tools, right? You know, sometimes they're easier, sometimes they're harder. And the barrier of entry for film photography for years, of course, was it's technical, and you have, you know, 24 exposures that you have to work with, and that's it. And then most people could not develop their own film into prints. They had to send it out, and they'd come back and they'd go, this looks very snapshotty. So most people kind of said that's hard. And then we start seeing the DSLRs and the other things, and they're like, oh, I can just slap it in my computer and I have an image. That psychology right there of the you know, taking something from creation, from capturing to production is very appealing for a lot of people. Now the barrier of entry seemed gone. However, what we learned very quickly is that a lot of people can take pictures, but not a lot of people are photographers. That takes commitment, right?
Yeah.
And it's cool. I think everybody should take pictures. That's fine. No problem at all. But, you know, I'm not yes, I was that person, like you said, that entered the market going, all the things, and all the established professionals were like, you know, I was that guy. But at the same time, that won't stop. They will keep coming, and they will come up, and most will fiddle away after the hobby is gone, and that's okay. The rest of us who are committed, probably to a fault, to doing this, will stay here, and that's good. And over time, people won't always just be looking for someone who pushes a button. They'll be hiring you for your vision. In theory, if you let that vision evolve, if you take that artistry inside you, which can be learned and practiced, and evolve it to the point where people go, I don't want Nicole because she pushes a button. I want Nicole because of her vision, right? That's where we should get to.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And let's see. Esketch, I don't know what your name is.
That's Eddie. That's Eddie. Hello,
Eddie.
Eddie.
Okay, great. So hi, Eddie. He said it's not exactly easy being a single dad in my 40s trying to make a living from being a creative. I get plenty of looks from people who ask what I do. So it seems like, I feel you, dude. It seems like that's definitely a common thread for us parents. There's a kind of a strange taboo about being a creative entrepreneur as a parent.
There is, yeah. Most people, again, the so-called financial advisors of the world, the rich millionaires who think they can tell you how to be a millionaire, but anyway, let's not go there. One of the things they tell you, which I agree with now in retrospect, is get your career and money and financials in order and then do the family thing if you want to do it. Oops, didn't do that way. But I'm just with you, Eddie. I'm a mid-40s single dad as well. I feel you. It doesn't help the genre I work in. Talk about stigma. So I get it, and it's not always easy because a lot of people look at you like, "But you're gone all the time. What about your kids, though?" And I'm like, I'm trying to make sure that I can take care of them, and it was more difficult before. It's now easier now because I have teenagers, but it's still not simple. Definitely not. So.
Right. I think anybody who knows you knows how much the time with your kids means to you. And when you're with them, it's quality. It's not just like, hi guys, bye guys, and there are parents who are with their kids all the time and basically ignore them. I mean, the amount of time you spend doesn't necessarily equal the quality of the time that you spend.
No. So. And I don't claim to be a super dad. I mean, I tell my kids openly, I'm like, if I feel like I messed something up, I'm like, look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I said A and I did Z, or I was going to be here and something changed. I apologize. I try to make up to them. I tell them straight up, I'm not perfect, but at least I'm sincerely interested in being their dad still, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it amounts to. They're actually very forgiving and understanding. It's been a while, obviously, since I've traveled, but that's the big thing. Sometimes I have trips that stack together and I'm gone 3 weeks. And that's tough, but we always talk with them and they seem to understand. And actually right now I've been home for 3 months. They're just kind of like, go.
We need a break. That's funny. Dad.
Just
leave me alone.
Go. Yeah. No, it's funny because sometimes they come back. All right. I'm separated. So they go to their moms and they come back to me. And sometimes they come back to me, we get them in the house. And I'm like, so what do you guys want to do? And they're like, I'm going to go play Xbox. And my daughter's like, I'm going to put my headphones on. I'll see you, because they're teenagers. I can't smother them all the time.
I know. I have the same thing going on with mine. I have a 17-year-old, about to be 17-year-old, and a preteen, and my two oldest, and they're definitely like, we'll just disappear into the back room for 8 hours because there are games to be had. And then my little one he's still in that phase where he's like, look at the thing I made. See what I did? I'm going to tell you a story. Look, it's got 4 chapters. I just made it up. And I'm like, okay.
Right
I
now,
have an article to write, man. I'm sorry. It's a struggle. But really, if anybody should trust somebody at some point, like trust a parent who works, because they can get shit done.
That's exactly right. People like, self-employed people, we have a lot of sarcastic things we say. And one of my favorite things is when someone says, yeah, I work 40 hours a week over there. I'm like, oh, how cute. You work part-time? That's nice.
Yeah. Yep. There's no such thing as off hours when you are a sole proprietor or a small business owner. You just are always working, or you better be always working if you want to survive.
All the social media posts, it's Friday.
Right? You're like, Friday? Okay, I'm still going to be working tomorrow.
Pretty much.
Scott Abels has joined us. Hi, Scott. Scott is a model and an actor here in New Mexico. And
hello,
I've
Scott.
done some of my favorite work with him. So welcome, Scott.
Excellent.
Yeah, and that brings up a really cool, interesting thing, going back to a little bit the talk, words are hard. Going back a little bit to when we were talking about diversifying. You gotta be able to laugh at yourself, right? Otherwise people think you're a robot. But going back to talking about diversifying, especially as an entrepreneur, how do you go about figuring out which areas you actually can successfully move into? Is that a trial and error thing? Is that something you maybe stumble upon and then just take advantage of when the opportunity presents itself? Or do you think that there's a way other photographers and creatives can maybe look for ways to spread out their income streams?
Gosh, isn't that the question though? I think that for me in general, everything is trial and error. That's how I work. I'm not let me look this up and read how something is done. Let me get someone's opinion necessarily. I'm a very, again, to a fault, trial and error kind of guy. So yeah, I endorse that idea. Now, I think that trial and error, it's important to recognize the error. And if there's, if you're failing, then you need to just stop and be like, all right, no, that's not working. Don't just stubbornly plod along something because you made a label for it or you made an Instagram account for it. If it's not working, you need to reconsider and change something. You know what I mean? So I've tried different things, different general directions of what I'm doing. But I think if I had a general overall suggestion, it would be don't diversify too hard. I joked earlier about, glamour and newborn photography. That's probably way too hard. That's going to confuse people.
Right.
But don't diversify too hard. So, like, for example, I still do music and I occasionally throw one up on my Instagram TV or whatever, just me playing music. I'm not trying to sell music. I'm not trying to be hired for music. I'm not trying to do anything with music business wise. It's just a little extra personality side of me that I like to show because it's fun. If I were to try to become a musician and somehow fuse it with my brand, an active working musician, I don't know. So I think just don't diversify too hard. Keep it cohesive in some way, but that's different for everyone though, isn't it? I wouldn't know exactly how to advise.
Yeah. I mean, kind of same. I had two entirely separate online lives, one as an author and one as a photographer. And I started off thinking it would be better to separate them because I didn't want to confuse people. I didn't want people looking for my book to go looking for Nicole York and then be like, this is a photographer. So that was a years long struggle for me. Like, trying to keep up with two entirely separate things and two different audiences and engage them as the person who writes versus the person who's a photographer. And that is a struggle, man. And it wasn't until not that long ago that I realized, well, the audience for this is all of the same. People who are geeky fantasy lovers are going to read fantasy books and probably consume fantasy media. So it makes sense for all of that to maybe be the same person. That means changing a little bit how I approach everything, but there is at least a kind of a middle ground where they can live. But you're right, there's definitely some places where you're not going to be a glamour photographer and a newborn photographer as the same person, and people walk into your studio with their baby and see these like goddess women on the walls and be like, and of course, what are we doing here?
The other way is true. You get like a modeling agency, go to your website and they see newborns. They'll be like, well, this is not the guy we need. You got to be smart about it. Now, in your case, with the writing and media content, you're still niche because you're fantasy. Right. If you're just like portraiture, that might be a little bit wide. And I don't know that you can get away with glamour and newborn and wedding. You just can't.
Right.
I think it's because it's not because of stigma or bias. It's that I think people generally, when they want to invest in someone, an artist, they want to invest in a specialist. Jack of all trades are rare to make a huge success in that kind of diversity. Yes, there's plenty of counterexamples. I'm sure someone will mention one, but for the most part, people want to hire.
They'll find the one that's out there and be like,
bam, this guy makes 8 figures a year doing 9 different genres. Cool, awesome. But that's what I think. I don't think diversifying really, really hard is vital. Some people want to own that. I've just owned what I do now blindly. I don't care about the stigma. I don't care what ceilings it puts on me in certain cases. It's what I do. And I just own that now.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think that's the way to stand in your power in a little bit, to know what you do and to be like unapologetic about it. Here we go. This is me. This is what I do.
Yep. I've been apologetic before. No more. And I haven't been that for a couple 3 years now. So
good. Yeah, no more. So maybe then when diversifying, it's fair to not necessarily look far afield genre-wise, but maybe product-wise or in what you offer, or platform wise, like maybe what you can offer on different platforms. I know some people, we of course know educators, right? And some people are doing it through a larger platform, and other people are looking at places like Skillshare or Udemy or things where they can kind of create their own content and put that out into the world. But other people are getting into things like printing or other, stuff that's kind of still related, but not necessarily just the images themselves. So maybe that's somewhere people can look.
And of course, like we mentioned a bit earlier, you're right on all of that. And of course, the most obvious one that most photographers try to diversify into is video. And I think that's a perfectly sound thing to do, because regardless of your genre, there's probably business there for you. However, I just want to reiterate again to anyone considering that there's a lot of things people don't know about me. And one of them was that in the 90s, I did a lot of video. We're talking analog video that then we would digitize, in some very archaic equipment and do, nonlinear digital editing in the 90s, which is like pulling teeth if I described it to you now. But I did a lot of video in the 90s, and now it's evolved to the point where, video's always been, film in general has always been an amazing medium, to say the least, and something you don't take lightly. There's a lot to it. And now no different. Just like photography isn't about buying a camera, video is even more not just about buying a camera. So if you want to diversify into video, probably a good idea, but take it very seriously. Learn. Don't pretend you have the answers because you're a photographer. Respect the medium and maybe get some training, because it's not a joke. And I know that because I used to do video and I dabble in it now, and seeing what actual professional video guys do. Yeah. That's something that if I were to offer that as a full-on service, I'm a couple of years out from that, of a lot of study and practice, So don't take that lightly, even though that's the most obvious direction photographers want to go. Just don't take it lightly.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, so in an interview with Kate Woodman, we were talking about, where the future of photography might be with all of these kind of advances in technology, and many of us broadening our skill sets a little bit. And she mentioned the potential of bringing together, different people and almost agency-ifying yourself, like, working with different people to try to be able to kind of produce content on your own. There's a great videographer here in Albuquerque named Brian Spencer, and he's worked with me a couple times, and he shows up on set and he has all of the things that I cannot have and cannot afford, this beautiful gimbal and these other things, and he's watching him move through and how he plans out how to get these different shots and stuff. I cannot think about that and what else I need to do at the same time. There's just no way for me to be dual people. So if I was going to try to learn that, it definitely would be by grabbing somebody like him and being like, hey, what can I give you to teach me the ways of the things? Because I would have to take too much of my time and energy away from what I'm doing to learn that in a way that would be able to compete with somebody like him for work.
That's right. Yeah. And if anyone, maybe not you, but if anyone decided they want to do this in earnest, just want to repeat, understand you're starting a whole new path. Just because you have a camera that takes video does not mean you're even close. So just respect it. And I'm sure there's plenty of videographers out there potentially watching who are like,
yeah,
it's the same exact thing as someone who just bought a DSLR who only is used to iPhone snaps, and know good and well that they have a journey ahead of them, right? So you have a journey ahead of you diversifying into video. But again, that is, going back to your diversity of business, that is the most logical direction that most people take or think about. They go, I should get into video. That's fine, but understand that is not a solution to a current financial problem. That is not a solution to a current cash flow issue or a business impact. It's not going to impact you tomorrow. You've got a long path ahead of you to become a viable videographer, especially if you're already a high in demand experienced photographer. It doesn't mean you're going to become that videographer tomorrow.
Oh, that's such a good point. I really hope people pay attention to that, because when you diversify, that's a long-term game, right? You're not going to all of a sudden just be making half your income from workshops. People don't know that they can trust you right away. You're going to have to go put yourself out there a little bit and have people that are like, yeah, this dude or this lady or whoever is like a fantastic teacher. You definitely should learn from them. That takes building trust over time as well. And maybe your first workshop or your first class is going to be kind of shit. So like that also, all of these things, that is a learning process as well. It's going to take time. So if you need money now, get a part-time job. Don't try to all of a sudden compete with, you know, people who have been in the business for a while and are trusted in what they do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just as an aside, my first workshop, people have asked me about this before. My very first workshop had the element of novelty going for it. So it filled up and sold out because it was my first. But it went from spike to, okay, that was fun. And then I had to build up my reputation for real. You know,
Yeah.
The first one was like, oh, first time. So there was some novelty element there. And I think a lot of times when we diversify, that novelty element gives us a sense of like, I got this, but then can you keep that going? Because the biggest, to me, the biggest definition, or the way I define success, is consistency more than anything else. You know, you can have a one home run, but are you striking out every other time? Because no, you need to be consistent in whatever you're doing. Then you've realized, oh, okay, I'm pretty good at this, you know, and it has to come with time, you know?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. 100%. I cannot overstate how much I agree with that, especially because trying to get or build these other skills, you certainly find there are things that apply. Like if you're a photographer and you're getting into videography, okay, well, you understand composition and you understand light. And there's definitely things that you have in common that give you this sense of security. Like, yeah, I can do this. And then you fall off that technical cliff after you realize how much you don't know. And you stumble over that stuff, but it's worth doing long-term. I feel like the biggest hurdle I find isn't even necessarily learning the skill itself, as it is being able to find the time away from the job I have to do to earn money to teach myself or learn those skills. Like being able to separate that is really, really difficult, because running a creative business takes so much time and energy. If you have to pull yourself away from that, you're potentially losing quite a bit of momentum.
You are, and even learning or expanding skill sets in your current main field. You know, like for example, I love retouching. Yay, retouching. But there's sometimes I'm like, I've done the same approach in what I'm doing for a couple of years. Is there something better? Do I know?
Right.
I'm just going through the motions. You know what I mean? It's like you get so busy that you forget to learn. Hell, the other day I noticed on my production computer over here, I didn't even have the newest version of my own plugin installed. And I was like, you know, you get so used to a routine, you know, not that a plugin defines your work, but, you know, you get used to a routine. You don't even realize you haven't updated something. In other words, there's always something new to learn. And even in what you're good at, there's always something. And sometimes you need to set aside some time. As I say this, I laugh, set aside some time for learning and self-advancement. And that's not always easy, you know, but you need to keep up.
Agree. And that goes back to the conversation I had with Pratik when we talked about the ability to bring in people that can free up time for you by taking over tasks that maybe you don't have to do yourself. Like maybe they can take over scheduling your posts or answering, you know, non-essential emails, or, you know, there's got to be some way out there that you can kind of free up that time if you plan on doing something like diversifying or learning a new skill. Because unless you're cool with staying up until, you know, 4 a.m, 5 days a week to do everything you need to do, man, find some way to. Time, I feel like, is probably the most overlooked and most undervalued asset that we have, but it's the most important.
It is because I mean, to expand on that, even we need to dedicate time to things, right? But there's also just so much that you can only accomplish with time. No amount of effort is going to help you. To get 10,000 hours of experience on something, it can't happen in a day. And are you going to be patient for that? You know what I mean? Just like old heartbreak, that takes time to go away. You can't just feel it. You can't think that away. You know, time is annoying because you can't make it quicker.
Yeah. Agreed. And that brings up a really interesting point that I want to get to. But first, just want to welcome our newcomers. So Kelly is back. Jade Elizabeth is here. Hi, Jade. Sarah J is joining us. And she's like, what's time? Girl, I don't know. And Gary asks, what is the one thing each of you want to learn and apply to your money-making endeavors in the next 6 months?
Wow. Well, that's a good general question overall. However, considering this year, I think that's a very loaded question, I guess, because there's so much more going on. Like in the next 6 months, I just want to get back to normal. That's the main thing I can think about. And things are picking up. Don't get me wrong. I want to get back to travel. I want to get back to the touring that I do, because that's how I make my business, et cetera, et cetera. But if there's one thing that I already, here's like a bunch of us, I started in January with all the New Year's resolutions and new plans, saying all the things, and then none of the things.
Yeah, 2020 slaps you in the face.
Right. So assuming the alien invasion doesn't happen in July, my goal, I mean, come on, this year's been
good.
Jumanji.
At this point, I wouldn't be surprised.
Right. I'd just be like, oh, there they are. Okay.
I know. One more check off the list.
I mean, you're in New Mexico. They're out there anyway. All right. So moving on from that, to me,
we don't talk about that.
So my January idea, if you will, I don't really believe in New Year's resolutions. What's time, but it's a thing. So I told myself in January that one of the initiatives I was going to do was to focus back on my events to be pure education, because for a time there I was hosting shooting events, which is where I host a location and talent, and then people come shoot, and that's great and that's fine. But there are so many events like that. They always have been, but now more than ever. So I was like, I'm going to go back to full education. I might even go back to 2-day workshops. I might even go back to group retouching classes. I'm going to go back to my 100% focus on education. And now, of course, with Pro EDU and other things and other initiatives that I'm taking, that's happening. So the next 6 months, you're going to see a strong shift in me going back to full-blown education, probably getting back into the conference circuit, et cetera, et cetera. And that's because I think that is what I'm really better at. And the more business I do in education, the more freedom I have to do my work. The reason why is that when I have to, quote, be hired to do photography for a living, I don't always get every single job I'm passionate about and that I love. Everybody has that. If I focus on education and that makes my career, I can be pickier about what I shoot. And in some ways that's worth it, because then I can do what I'm really passionate about, and not always just take the gig because I need to take the gig. And that's not a slight on my customers. Don't get me wrong. I always do my best. We all do, but we all know what it's like. We know when we have to take the gig that we're indifferent about. So the less indifferent gigs I take, I think the happier I'm going to be in here. And I think that's important to me. And I like teaching and I'm passionate about it. So I'd rather be a passionate educator who does work that I'm passionate about for the most part. And that was the plan for January. So that's going to be the plan for the next 6 months for me anyway. How about you?
I like that. Actually, I think your quote was like, I was like, oh, you'd rather be a passionate educator than an indifferent photographer. And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, like let go, because that's the thing. What I was talking about with moms before is we start out with all of this passion because we're getting this approbation that is just not part of being a parent. And people are telling you you're doing a good job. But then once you start hitting that wall of, okay, now you're working sometimes with customers who are not ideal for you. And you're sometimes doing shoots that are just not inspiring. And then the business is hard and you start hitting your head against this brick wall and it takes all the joy out of the work for you. So there certainly is something to be said for finding something, doing something that you know you can be passionate about so that it frees up that time for making work that you love. So I like that a lot. For me, I have a nose itch, excuse me. I'm not picking my nose, it just itches. For me, I think my goal is to be more visible, and to also use that visibility to drag as many people along with me as I can.
Gonna take you all out with me. All right.
Well. I know. Well, I'm like, so number one, obviously with things going on in the world right now, I feel like having any platform at all gives me a kind of a social responsibility to do what I can to use that for the benefit of people who need it. So that is a thing, which some of the interviews that I have coming up were geared specifically toward, number one, it's education for me, because so Ryan Redcorn is going to be joining me toward the end of this month. He's an Osage photographer whose kind of mission with his photography is to take the narrative of his people back from white photographers who've kind of used it almost in a mercenary way, right? tell stories that the people didn't necessarily want to tell about themselves. And that is something I myself need education on, despite even having, you know, family members who are Indigenous. That's something I need education on, for one, but us as a photography community have kind of overlooked in general. So that is something that I'm passionate about, is kind of being able to use whatever platform I'm building in order to do that. And I think back to the money making part, I think if we focus on the things, like you said, that we're passionate about and that make us want to get up in the morning and put on makeup, curl our damn hair, all of that stuff that we don't necessarily love, then I think money at that point just follows. And if you do nothing but go out chasing money, I feel like you never get happiness, which is the more important part. So if you can chase what you're passionate about and what makes you want to get up out of bed and what makes you feel like you're doing something worthwhile with your life, I think people respond to that. And I think then money follows, because people want to get on board rather than, okay, so here's my business plans, I'm going in this direction, and now I have maybe some money, at least for now, but I'm like burnt out and unhappy and whatever else. So I guess I would say that my money making endeavor is to not make money. Not that I don't want the monies. I mean, guys, if you want to send monies my way, I will take them. But I want it as a side effect of doing something that matters to me, I guess.
I completely agree with everything you just said. That's, and I don't know if it's, you know, I don't want to call it like old age, but having been self-employed since high school, done this for so long, I have done untold amounts of work that I didn't want to do. And although I didn't always have a quote day job, I tried that, kept getting fired. But I didn't always have a day job, but I did have clients and jobs I didn't want to do. And I did them because gig's a gig, as we say in the industry, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm selfish, I guess, and a little tired of gig's a gig. I want more things that I'm passionate about. And how do I go about getting that? You know what I mean? Don't get me wrong, I'll do what I got to do to pay the bills. But I'm trying to get more and more, because when I'm passionate, I get, well, business is more successful when I'm excited about it. I'm not just being a temperamental artist here. I'm kind of being one, but I'm also trying to just, I feel like I get better work. There was some work that I've done in the last few years that was just a paid job, and I look back at it and I go, that's almost embarrassing. And I'm sorry for the client. It's not because I did something catastrophically wrong. It's just the job wasn't for me. I shouldn't have taken it. It's not something I belong doing. And I took the job and I shouldn't have, you know, that's not even fair to the client. So if my heart's not in it, it's not fair across the board for anyone involved. So I want more of that. I want more of the passionate work. So.
Yes. I agree so much. When I stopped doing family portraiture regularly, I would still every now and then get inquiries. And I realized it's much, much better for everybody if I send you to photographers who are passionate about doing this kind of work, because they love what they're doing. They're going to give you 110% of themselves. And yes, I can still take a portrait of your family, but unless I'm doing it the way I want and not the way you want, I'm not going to be 100% on board. I'm going to be, you know, doing well for you, but I'm definitely not going to be investing everything I am into taking you into a field for a sunset portrait of your family, because I just am not interested.
No, I agree.
My goal with photography is not, I'm not a capturer of moments. I'm not here to preserve anything for you. I have things I want to make. And if you're interested in getting on board with that, then come with me and I would love that. But that's just, for me, that's just not why I'm passionate about photography. Of course, I still photograph my family most of the time with my iPhone, but that's what's on here. I don't want to carry this thing is, look at this monster.
Right,
this thing is freaking huge.
Right.
I'm getting a look. My husband's headed off to work. I love you. But yeah, that's not why I want to do photography. I will capture those moments, but I want to do photography because I want to make things. So it doesn't make sense for me to work in a place where somebody else could be doing a better job for you because they care. And there are some people who can teach themselves how to be passionate about that kind of stuff, like just because they're helping people, which is super, super awesome.
No,
so go see them.
It's amazing. There's photographers I know here in town who are legitimately passionate about weddings. and they shoot them so beautifully, and they love the wedding process. And I'm like, awesome. I'm glad you are, because if someone's booking you for such an important day for them, they need someone like that, you know? Now, in my genre of glamour and fashion, I work with a lot of models. Now, and by and large, models are generally young, and they're in their 20s. And what do people in their 20s like to do a lot? Get married. So I get a lot of requests from models I've worked with, will you shoot my wedding? I'm like, super flattered, but no, you know, because I'm not who you need for that, just because I have a camera, you know. I'm sorry, I'm not insulted by the request, but I do get it a lot, and I have to decline. Often they're like, really? You don't want the job? And I say, that's not for me, and I refer them because I know better, you know?
Yeah, which is just that reminder yet again that if you're going to diversify, do it in ways that make sense, because a lot of the people who shoot weddings will then also shoot their family, because now they've kind of grown, so they're a photographer that they can take with them over time. But also goes back to when you're talking about your headshot and becoming a people to your potential clients, like becoming a real human being to them, because at this stage I think we have so much access to each other that we want to work with people we like, and people we trust, and people who look like the kind of person we want to be around. So it's so cool how all of that just kind of plays in.
Which I've been saying, it goes to my thought that I tell a lot of people, is like, when the mainstream internet first hit big and around the turn of the millennia, we had internet before that, but the mainstream internet really went big. Within 10 years, by 2010, what we had was more information than we know what we can do with, right? And now that's expounded even exponentially to untold levels of more information and more resources than we know what to do with. So what's happened is that with this overwhelming amount of info, what has happened is that more than ever, vetted and verifiable info is the most valuable thing we have. And so often that means a personal referral. I will take a personal referral 1,000 times over any website. I don't care how impressive it is. Personal referral to me is gold. It is everything, because if I want a photographer and I go to Google, I have thousands now. It's overwhelming. I don't know what to pick. But if Nicole says, oh, for this, you need this guy. That guy's my guy. Let's go. That's it. You know, we that personal element is so important now with this age of over information.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100%. So we're closing up on our time, guys. If you have questions for Nino, make sure you get them in now so that we can answer them before I let him escape. And while we wait for those questions to pop up, there is just kind of one more thing. Well, I have an ending question that I like to get to, but the one more thing I had written down as you were talking before, when we're talking about kind of making this venture or trying to make business work and diversifying and trying to find these ways to kind of stay alive, and also how finished is better than perfect. I talk about this damn YouTube show all the time. It's called Impact Theory. It's run by a guy named Tom Bilyeu. And he was the founder of Quest Nutrition, and now he's kind of moved into, you know, a different realm. But he interviews some of the most incredible people. And one of the things that he says often, which he's a really successful business person, pretty inspiring guy, is that the main thing that we have to overcome is inertia. And that means that you have to get moving, right? Like, and I know for me, I sit back and I think about everything way too much. I'm like, I could go this way, but what if it's wrong? And what if it means that I don't go this way and that would have been better? And I could have moved this thing, or there's so many potentialities that are maybe bad or maybe good. And I can't, like, all of the thinking, when ultimately what we really have to do is just move, right? Like, you have to move, and then you have to keep moving. And if you're moving in the wrong direction, it's a lot easier to change course once you have the momentum. But if you don't overcome that inertia of sitting still, then you never go anywhere. So despite, I feel like, what we're kind of encouraging people about, you know, if you're going to diversify and stuff, just go, like, go. And then if it's not right, like you said before, when you find like it doesn't work, stop. Just change directions. Like, don't hit a wall and quit, like break through the wall and then turn, like, just go, because getting it done is going to mean more for you and the people you want to serve in the long run than all of your, like, most philosophical thoughts about what you could possibly do and how you could mess it up. Like, just move forward, even if it's not entirely right, go. And then if you have that momentum, you can change directions later on.
If you knew just how much I felt what you just said in my soul right now today. Good pep talk. I needed that. I won't explain why.
Because I need it too. I need it too, which is why I just felt like you needed to say it when you were talking before. I grabbed my notepad and wrote it down real quick because I was like, oh, that's such a good point. And I felt like we're kind of skirting the edges of that idea for so long, but it matters so much just to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're speaking to me there big time today, this week.
I'm so glad. And I encourage people, if you have never seen an episode of Impact Theory, go find that on YouTube, because you learn so much from industry experts about the things that they do to get where they are. The whole point of that show is to give people the skills they need to like manifest the destiny that they want for themselves. So I would encourage people to head in that direction. So Scott, our questions before the end here. Scott is asking, is it irritating being asked by a photographer, what do you want to do? Oh, it is irritating being asked by a photographer, what do you want to do? I'm the tool to be used. Oh, so I think he's talking from a model's perspective, working with photographers, that it sounds like for him, it makes a lot more sense to be told, here's what we're doing today, rather than like, okay, you do a thing and I'll just try to make something out of that.
Yeah, so if we're coming from the model photographer dynamic, I'm definitely guilty of, telling a model, all right, do stuff, and sometimes that's cool if he or she is just a pro and that's what they work with, and the everything's set up. Let's say it's just a gray background, single light, fashion vibe, go do stuff. That's fine and all, but I've learned over the years, especially recent years, to do less do stuff and more interaction, more guidance, because I've always felt like, well, if he or she knows what they're doing, leave them alone. That's true to a degree. However, many models are like, yo, I can bring anything you want, but I need something. What is your vision? Let's see how this is the direction that takes me. So I agree with that. I think that goes, I can definitely attest to that, because I used to be the just do stuff. Now, sometimes I do it intentionally though. I will be like, they're like, okay, so what are we going for? I was like, don't know. I'm going to move quick. Follow me. And we go. And because I want that potential to capture something that was unexpected, that moment. And if you try to craft that moment, I think you lose it. So sometimes I will surprise model and just be like, go, 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 go. And I'll shoot faster than they're moving, because I might catch something cool, or whatever. But for the most part, yeah, I have to remind myself, give some vision, not because you're telling them what to do, but you're talking about the overall vibe that you want, Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yeah, same. I agree, Scott. And I think there are definitely times, like you said, when you can kind of grab inspiration and motivation from, like when you were shooting, with Jenny on the mountain, there's all of this around you. Okay, let's just go find something. Let's see what inspires, us to try something. And there are times when that is absolutely fantastic. And then other times when you definitely come to something with a vision and you need to let that model know what you want. And even the most amazing model can't see themselves on camera. So even if they're fantastic at moving and fantastic at posing, it's totally fair to be like, okay, stop. That was beautiful. Drop your elbow just a little bit. Or, just those little things, so that they know at least they're going in the right direction and getting what you need.
And I admit that when I do give guidance, it's still very abstract. And I've been told by less experienced models that I'm not always easy to work with, even though I'm personable, I'm friendly. But a lot of times I'm like, keep going with more of that. They're like, what do you mean more of that? I'm like, more of that. Because I want them to be, but if you're a little more inexperienced, I'm lousy at hand-holding and coaching a new model. I know this, I don't bother anymore. That's awesome that they're starting out, but if I'm not going to call on them, because I'm no good at guiding them through it. I need someone that I can just kind of bounce off back and forth. And sometimes they tell me, it's like, no, that looks terrible. Let me try this. Oh, I see what you're doing. Cool. Give me more of that. It's very abstract. I'm actually not a finger here, move that there, that a little more, arch the elbow right there, ankle, perfect. I'm not that guy. So I am a little more abstract, but I still try to give some guidance of what my vision might be. So
yeah, I think it's one of the fun things about photography is how differently each of us work and how differently we approach what we're doing. And I mean, that's part of the cool part of it, because then clients or models who would be a perfect fit for you might be completely the wrong fit for me. And so that just makes that availability of work and people to work with that much better, because, then we can fit with the people we vibe with.
years ago, I did a few workshops in a row with Craig Lemire, and we both taught together.
Mm-hmm.
And Craig Lemire is a micromanaging pose guy. I mean, at least as he
Right.
was 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know what he does these days, but he's all about the fingers and angles and right there. No, hold that, move that, and then he nails it. And it's a very Craig Lemire shot, and it's choice. And then me, when I go and teach my element, I'm like free flowing, you know. So it's A and Z approaches to capture a shot.
Yeah, and still equally legitimate and still making wonderful stuff, and just goes to show you that there is not a right way to approach how you do your work. There's just the way that works for you.
Right.
Bobby wants to know, for both of you, is there a posted schedule of the upcoming interviews? I know, Nino, you kind of put your stuff out a little bit in advance, kind of like for a few weeks worth. Do you have a place aside from your announcements that people can go to see what's going on?
So I was doing, 3 or 4 of my own interviews on my channel a week during the quarantine, not just because there was nothing else to do, but because it was fun and it was a great way to give something back to the community and talk and all that. But now June, I haven't scheduled, even though I have people in the wings, because I was waiting on the Pro EDU thing to schedule. I have clients that are now calling on and this and that. So I'm definitely not going to be doing 3 or 4 a week anymore. But I'm going to try to do 2 or 3 a month, and I don't have that nailed down yet, but there will be.
Fair. Totally fair. For me, Bobby, everything is on my website. So I have a section of the website, NicoleYork.com, that is events and interviews, and you can go and actually see the calendar and you can see what is coming, and that's updated as people get scheduled or as people, so it's my things as well. So if I'm going live with somebody else, or if I'm getting interviewed, or if I'm appearing somewhere or whatever, all that stuff is on the calendar.
Yeah, like your roundtable that you do.
So. Yeah. The roundtable, I should probably, that's every Monday. So I should probably add that to my calendar since I'm participating in that as well. But yeah, those are every Monday. And that is on the Photographers Roundtable and on Facebook, and then the Photographers Roundtable on YouTube. So cool. So we don't have any more questions popping up. So the final question, Nino, before we start closing everything down is, what is your why? Why do you create? Why do you do the kind of work that you do? What is it that motivates you to do what you do?
Specifically the work that I do? Or just like why I go through life?
Well, I mean, sometimes they influence. I will let you decide how to answer that question.
Okay. Then I'll talk about the work that I do. How's that? When I first started, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. At the time, my now ex-wife, but we were married at the time, I started taking photos of her. It was just to create pretty pictures to see what happened. And then it was actually on her suggestion that I start shooting other models to see how that worked. See if I could, like we mentioned in the beginning of the interview, I was just kind of trying to figure out a new income stream, see what I could do. But to really make the long story short, over time, I realized that when you go as a man to shoot models and shoot pictures that are, sensually or sexually provocative or evocative in some manner, immediately comes the criticism and the stigma. Immediately comes well, of course we know why you do what you do, Nino, chicks. And over time, not very quickly, actually, early on, I felt a sense of responsibility because I started talking to boudoir photographers and I started learning a lot about that philosophy. I realized that wasn't for me. That wasn't my genre. I'm lousy at making someone who's never done this kind of photography feel comfortable. It's soul sucking for me. I'm impressed by people who can do that, good for their customers. But I knew a lot of boudoir photographers. And I also, sorry about alienating myself, guys, but a lot of glamour photographers annoyed the shit out of me. And I was like, wow, your head is somewhere else, And so I felt like what I do taught me to take the teachings that I already had growing up about how do I put this without going into a huge discussion. In general, what I've learned is that in doing what I do, that, for example, some of the most insecure and vulnerable women I've ever met are glamour models. Some of the most persecuted women I've ever met are glamour models. And I started realizing there's a vulnerability there and a sensitivity there. And the stigma is real. And they're all labeled by general society, by ignorant people. They're labeled as skanks. They're labeled as sluts. That if you didn't pose that way, you wouldn't have problems in life. And the constant mixed messages that society gives women, which is please be attractive, please be pretty, please be sexy. But when you do that, you're also wrong. So since women can't win, I realized that boudoir is empowering in its own way. It's usually more private. Now, these girls choose to do this very publicly, but it's still an empowerment statement. I think these women are allowed to do whatever the hell they want to do with their bodies and their image. And if I am a method of that and with my artistry, then cool. Now, it's not just that. I also like making stuff that looks really pretty. I like making an image and go, wow, that's gorgeous. Wow, that's intense. Wow, that's sexy. Wow, that's subtle. That may be a little sad. I don't know. I don't consider my work to be overly emotionally profound, but there's a sense of beauty and celebration in sexuality that I don't think people should shy away from. But it's always also about keeping it from going into the vulgar realm, because that's my threshold. Everyone has a different threshold of sexuality. What's vulgar to somebody is art to someone else. My threshold is right about there, and that's fine. So over time, it evolved into artwork that I enjoy seeing and creating, but also feel like it's a very abstract and not direct message to how I feel, especially as a father of a teenage daughter, about, I think, let's put it this way, people in general can assert themselves in society that's very critical and harsh and condemning in lots of ways. Women have every option in the world to do what they want, but women can, when they choose to be sexual, in some manner, in the way they appear, the way they say, the things they write, the way they dress, immediately hit with criticism. Immediately. And for better or worse, I try to show that that's okay. And I enjoy that what I do is a little bit subversive. It upsets some people. They don't understand it. They think it's still wrong. And that's fine. I enjoy that. I like that. Like when I play heavy metal, I'm not there to make people happy. I'm here to make myself happy. And if you think it's subversive, that's your problem. So I'm not saying that I'm this big, profound messenger and arbiter of morality. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that for me, it is like an extremely public boudoir approach, if that makes sense. But
yeah,
it's still also my vision, my artistry. I don't like people to shy away from human sexuality, and I don't think that's a healthy thing to do. And I certainly don't appreciate, I've never liked the messages that we send, especially young women in society. So, if I help celebrate that in some manner and make them feel good about themselves and powerful about themselves, then awesome. Yes, it's a lot of commercial aspect to it, but still. Does that make any sense?
nice. No, it does. Absolutely. Sure, it does. I shot boudoir for a little while, and you absolutely get that sense. And you can tell when a woman is feeling empowered in how she moves and responds to you as the photographer, and what she's, there's some when you'll start and they will feel, maybe they're a little more modest, and by the end of the shoot, they're ready to take their top off and they're doing all the things because they're like, this is free. Like, I am now free to do this thing that maybe scared me before, or maybe I felt insecure about. And now they're like, yep, mine. And I get to say what I do with it and how I show it, and if I show it, and in what manner I show it. So there absolutely is a sense of empowerment there. And so I absolutely agree with and see why that would be a profound motivator.
Don't get me wrong. There's definitely some nuances there. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's a lot of self exploitation that can occur, all in the name of chasing that paper. That's unfortunate. You see a lot of models doing that to varying degrees. Even there's some blurry gray area. It's all very delightfully clear as mud. But the acceptance and the understanding that feminine sexuality is not wrong, and that every woman should have a right to express that however she wants, whether it's very subdued and demure or very in your face and aggressive. That is her choice. And this victim shaming nonsense has got to stop. We can talk about that all day. So the idea that a model gets a dirty comment or a dick pic in their inbox, well, they asked for it. Let's just stop that trash. You can be an accountant in an office wearing a suit every day, and you're going to get a dick pic from a guy.
Yep.
Because men are garbage. I'm sorry, but they are. So I look at it like, let my little way, my stupid little simple way of kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, empowering, but maybe being a conduit of empowerment, if that makes sense.
Yep. It does, and I like it. And I like that, sir. We have reached the end. We always end up going about an hour and a quarter, an hour and a half. It seems like I never quite make the hour mark. But when you're having great conversations, cares if it's a little bit over, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So first, let me just thank you, Nino, for joining me. I always love talking to you. I feel like we're having a great conversation. So
likewise, Nicole. Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. And then also to Kelly and Sarah and Scott and Bobby and Gary and everybody who showed up. Thank you guys for being here and hanging out. It's always awesome when you guys are here. And if you feel like this content is valuable, if you're getting a lot from the interviews, or you feel like these are, you know, worth sharing with the world, if you could like and subscribe, that would be super great. And if you think you know people who might be able to benefit from the kind of wisdom that Nino was throwing around today, if you could share this with them, that would be fantastic. Let me pull up real quickly, just so that I can let everybody know. I probably should do this in advance, but you know, I have issues with managing my time because I'm the worst person.
We addressed that earlier. We solved that.
I don't know how I try to do. Yeah, it's not ideal. So tomorrow, Ella Grace Bell will be with me. She is a beauty and e-commerce photographer in Vancouver, BC. So she's going to be able to talk about a lot of kind of the ins and outs of that part of commercial photography that doesn't always get a lot of attention. So we'll be able to go over that with her. So if you want to find out more about that, hang out here tomorrow. We will be going live at 2 p.m. Pacific time. So, or 2 p.m. my time. 2 p.m. my time. These time zones is not fair to people. To me, it's not fair to me.
You know what? Just stay on her channel all day. It'll pop up.
I think going to be 2 p.m. my time. Yeah, just be here. Yeah, it'll be all right. Anyway, yes. Thanks again, everybody. And, you know, thank you. We'll end the live and then I'll say goodbye to you. Bye, guys.
Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Buttons. Why are there buttons?